Flight attendant slapped black mom holding baby didn't know her husband owned the airline. Control your screaming brat or I'll have security remove you both from this aircraft immediately. The sharp crack of flesh meeting flesh echoed through the first-class cabin. Flight attendant Victoria Prescott's palm had just struck Aria Reynolds' cheek as she cradled 6-month-old Layla against her chest. The baby's cries intensified from the sudden violence. Passengers in nearby seats pulled out phones recording what they assumed was justified discipline of an unruly traveler. A ripple of shocked murmurs spread through the cabin, punctuated by occasional nods of approval. Finally, someone with backbone, an elderly woman in pearls, whispered approvingly to her seatmate. Aria's cheek burned crimson, but her dark eyes remained steady. She adjusted baby Layla's pink blanket with trembling hands, her boarding pass visible in her lap. Mrs. A. Reynolds with a special gold status code that Prescott had completely ignored. The cabin fell silent except for Layla's soft whimpering and the click of recording phones. Prescott straightened her navy uniform, the silver wings pinned to her lapel catching the cabin lights as she played to her audience. The slap had energized her a moment to demonstrate real authority to the first-class passengers who paid premium prices. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disruption," Prescott announced loudly enough for the entire cabin to hear. "Some people simply don't understand appropriate travel etiquette." Murmurs of approval rippled through the cabin. A businessman in an expensive suit nodded toward Aria. "Thank God someone's maintaining standards. These people always think they can do whatever they want." Aria remained silent, gently bouncing Layla to calm her cries. The baby's tiny fist wrapped around her mother's finger, a gesture that should have melted hearts but only seemed to irritate the watching passengers more. Prescott pulled out her radio, speaking with theatrical authority. "Captain Garcia. We have a code yellow in first class. Disruptive passenger with infant refusing to comply with crew instructions." The radio crackled back. "Copy that, Victoria. How do you want to proceed?" "I'm recommending immediate removal before departure. She's already delayed us 8 minutes with this tantrum." Aria glanced at her phone. The screen showed 14 minutes until departure, and below that a text notification. "Corporate merger announcement scheduled for 2 p.m. EST. All systems ready." She tucked the phone away before Prescott could read the message clearly. "Excuse me," Aria said quietly, her voice barely audible over the cabin noise. "My ticket shows seat 2A. I paid for first-class service, and I'd appreciate." Prescott cut her off with a harsh laugh. "Honey, I don't care what scam you pulled to get that ticket. People like you always try to upgrade illegally. I know every trick in the book." Across the aisle, a young woman, maybe college-aged, held up her phone filming for TikTok. "Y'all, this is insane. This flight attendant just slapped a mom with a baby. I can't even." Her viewer count was climbing 847, 1, 233, 3, 456. SkyPoint Airways Flight 631 from Chicago to Atlanta hummed with pre-departure activity. The first-class cabin gleamed with polished surfaces and plush leather seats. Outside, early morning sun reflected off the wings, casting a golden glow through the windows. The cabin atmosphere was tense with anticipation, not just for the flight, but for the unfolding drama. Aria Reynolds sat perfectly still in seat 2A, one hand cradling Layla against her chest, the other resting on the armrest with calculated calm. At 34, Aria possessed the quiet confidence that came from a lifetime of navigating spaces that weren't designed to welcome her. Her simple cream cashmere sweater and tailored jeans were elegant but deliberately understated. No flashy jewelry, no designer logos, just a simple wedding band and a tasteful watch that most wouldn't recognize as worth more than some passengers' cars. Her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun, professional and practical for traveling with an infant. The choice to travel alone with Layla had been deliberate. After years of corporate travel with a security team and executive treatment, Aria had wanted to experience SkyPoint Airways as an ordinary passenger. She'd worn minimal makeup and dressed comfortably rather than in her usual corporate attire. The gold status code on her ticket was the only outward indication of her importance, a code Prescott had either missed or chosen to ignore. Baby Layla, at 6 months old, was experiencing her first flight. Her discomfort had started during boarding when the cabin pressure began to change, making her ears hurt. Her cries weren't excessive, just the normal sounds of an infant adjusting to a new environment, but they'd become the catalyst for prejudice to reveal itself. Dressed in a yellow onesie with tiny elephants, Layla was the picture of innocence, unaware of the storm brewing around her existence in the first-class cabin. Victoria Prescott had been a flight attendant with SkyPoint Airways for 15 years. At 42, she'd worked her way to senior cabin crew status on premium routes, building her identity around her position of authority. Her immaculate uniform, crisp white shirt, navy blazer with silver wings, perfectly applied makeup was her armor. She'd seen the airline industry change over the years, watching as what she considered standards had eroded. In her mind, first class was reserved for a certain type of passenger, and a young black woman with a crying baby didn't fit that image. Captain Richard Garcia, 51, had been piloting commercial flights for over 20 years. A man who prioritized schedules and procedure over passenger welfare, he trusted his flight crew implicitly and rarely questioned their judgments. His relationship with Prescott was one of mutual respect. She maintained order in his cabin, he supported her decisions without investigation. From the cockpit, he heard only Prescott's version of events filtered through years of shared biases and unchallenged assumptions. Sofia Alvarez, the 19-year-old college student recording the incident, had initially started filming with the assumption that the mother was at fault. Her TikTok livestream had begun with commentary reflecting this bias. Another entitled parent who can't control their kid. But as events unfolded, her perspective was beginning to shift. A social media influencer with a growing following, she unconsciously narrated events with increasing unease, her camera steady as she documented what was becoming increasingly uncomfortable. James Whitfield occupied seat 3C directly behind Aria. The 56-year-old investment banker traveled first class weekly and considered it his right to a peaceful cabin. His expensive suit, monogrammed cufflinks, and perpetual expression of entitled impatience marked him as someone who expected the world to bend to his convenience. Every cry from baby Layla was to him a personal affront, a disruption of the service he'd paid for. His nods of approval at Prescott's actions emboldened her. Air Marshal Elena Martinez sat unobtrusively in seat 4D. At 28, she was newer to the Federal Air Marshal Service, but already questioning some of the protocols she'd been trained to follow. Dressed in civilian clothes to blend in, she watched the situation with professional assessment, noting the disproportionate response to what appeared to be a routine case of an infant experiencing discomfort. Though required to maintain her cover, her eyes reflected growing concern as Prescott's behavior escalated. The first-class cabin of Flight 631, with its 12 premium seats, had become an inadvertent stage for a drama about power prejudice and assumptions. Outside the plane's windows, the tarmac of O'Hare International Airport buzzed with morning activity ground crews loading luggage, refueling trucks, circling nearby aircraft passengers, boarding other flights, unaware of the tension mounting in the SkyPoint cabin. The drama was unfolding against an invisible corporate backdrop. SkyPoint Airways, one of the country's largest carriers, had been making headlines for its pending merger announcement news that would reshape the aviation industry. But at this moment in this cabin, corporate strategies and stock prices seemed distant from the human drama playing out in seat 2A. As the minutes ticked toward scheduled departure, the atmosphere in the cabin grew increasingly charged. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact with the unfolding scene, others leaning forward with the morbid fascination of those witnessing someone else's humiliation. Flight attendants in the main cabin whispered among themselves, sensing that something unusual was happening up front, but unsure of the details. The stage was set. The characters were in place. and what had begun as a routine morning flight was about to become a watershed moment that none of them would ever forget. The comments on Sophia's TikTok livestream weren't supporting Aria. They were harsh, judgmental. Finally, someone disciplining bad parents. Why can't people control their kids on flights? That mom looks entitled AF. Flight attendant is a hero. Prescott noticed the filming and played up her role, squaring her shoulders and projecting her voice. Ma'am, if you can't manage your child appropriately, I have every right to request your removal from this aircraft. Airline policy is very clear about disruptive passengers. Aria opened her carry-on bag to retrieve baby formula. As she did, a flash of platinum caught the light, an airline executive card tucked between diapers and bottles. The card was quickly hidden again, but something about its design seemed different from standard frequent flyer cards. Her phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID was visible to nearby passengers' SkyPoint Airways executive office. She declined the call. Prescott's eyes narrowed. Who exactly do you think you're calling? Your baby daddy isn't going to save you from federal aviation regulations. The insult hit like another slap. Several passengers chuckled. James Whitfield spoke up from behind her. Miss, you're holding up 180 passengers with this drama. Some of us have important business to attend to. A notification appeared on the cabin screens 12 minutes until mandatory departure. Captain Garcia's voice echoed over the intercom. Flight crew, please prepare for final boarding completion. Aria checked her watch. A simple black timepiece. Nothing flashy, but if someone looked closely, they might notice the engraving on the back. To my brilliant wife, Dr. Prescott was building to her crescendo. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one final time to gather your belongings and deplane voluntarily. If you refuse, I'll have federal air marshals escort you off this aircraft. The TikTok live stream hit 8,000 viewers. Comments flooded in faster than Sophia could read them, but buried among the harsh judgments were a few different voices. Something's not right here. Why is the mom so calm? That lady seems way too composed. Flight attendant is way too aggressive. A business passenger near the window opened his laptop and began typing rapidly on an aviation industry forum. His post was titled, Witnessing Discrimination in Real-Time SkyPoint Flight 631. Within minutes, industry insiders were following the developing story. The passenger glanced up occasionally, his expression increasingly troubled as he typed updates. Prescott pulled out her radio again. Captain passenger is non-compliant. Requesting immediate ground security assistance. Copy. Ground crew is standing by. Aria spoke for the second time, her voice steady, despite the public humiliation. Ma'am, I understand you're following what you believe are protocols, but I'd suggest verifying my passenger status before taking irreversible action. Irreversible. Prescott's voice rose with incredulity. Lady, the only thing irreversible here is your behavior. You think because you bought an expensive outfit and somehow got your hands on a first-class ticket you can disrupt an entire flight. The elderly woman in pearls leaned forward. Young lady, in my day, parents knew how to travel with children properly. This display is absolutely shameful. More phones appeared. The incident was being documented from multiple angles. Facebook live streams started. Instagram stories began uploading. The hashtag flight drama hashtag was beginning to trend locally, but Aria remained unnaturally calm. She wasn't arguing, wasn't raising her voice, wasn't making demands. Her composure was almost unsettling, like someone who knew something the rest of the cabin didn't. Behind her composed exterior, Aria's heart raced. Each breath required deliberate control, each word carefully measured. Years of being the only black woman in corporate boardrooms had trained her for this, never showing the fear, the anger, the hurt. But holding Layla while being publicly humiliated tested even her iron discipline. Baby Layla had finally quieted, seemingly responding to her mother's steady heartbeat. The infant's dark eyes looked around the cabin with the innocent curiosity that should have charmed fellow passengers. Instead, it seemed to irritate them more. 10 minutes, Prescott announced with finality. Security will be here in 10 minutes, and this situation will be resolved one way or another. Aria kissed Layla's forehead gently and whispered something too quiet for the recording phones to capture. But her eyes held a knowledge that made the smartest observers suddenly uncomfortable. Something was about to change. Prescott moved to the galley and began preparing for departure, speaking in hushed tones with another flight attendant. Can you believe the nerve? Bringing a screaming baby to first class and then acting like she owns the place. The other attendant, a younger woman named Melissa, glanced nervously toward Aria. Victoria, are you sure about this? She seems pretty calm now. The baby stopped crying. It doesn't matter, Prescott hissed. She was disruptive and I've already called security. Besides, did you see how she looked at me like I was beneath her? People like that need to learn their place. Melissa shifted uncomfortably. Maybe we should just let Captain Garcia make the final call. What if she really is a gold status member? Prescott's laugh was brittle. Gold status. Please, look at her. I know every executive by sight, and she's definitely not one of them. She straightened her uniform jacket. I've been working these routes for 15 years. I know who belongs in first class. Back in the cabin, James Whitfield had begun loudly checking his watch and sighing dramatically. This is ridiculous. I have a connection to make in Atlanta. Important clients are waiting. A few seats away, an older gentleman with salt and pepper hair glanced between Aria and Prescott with growing concern. He hadn't spoken yet, but his expression suggested internal conflict, like someone watching an accident in slow motion, but unsure how to stop it. Aria's phone buzzed again. This time she glanced at it briefly before silencing it. The screen showed multiple missed calls and urgent text messages, all from numbers associated with SkyPoint's corporate offices. She took a deep breath and continued gently rocking Layla. On Sophia's live stream, the comments were evolving. Wait, why does she keep getting calls from the airline? Something weird is happening. That flight attendant seems power-hungry. The viewer count had reached 12,000 and was climbing steadily. Prescott returned from the galley with renewed purpose. She stood over Aria, her shadow falling across the seated mother and child. Security is on their way. I've given you every opportunity to leave with dignity. Now it will be a federal matter. Aria looked up, meeting Prescott's gaze directly for the first time. Ms. Prescott? She began, her voice low and measured. How do you know my name? Prescott interrupted, momentarily thrown. It's on your name tag, Aria replied calmly. As I was saying, I believe there's been a misunderstanding that we could resolve without escalating to security. The only misunderstanding is yours. Prescott replied, her voice rising. You seem to think the rules don't apply to you. This is a premium cabin with standards. If you want to let your child scream, there's always coach or the bus. The businessman who'd been posting on the aviation forum had switched to a direct email to SkyPoint's customer service department. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he documented the unfolding situation, occasionally glancing up with increasing alarm. 8 minutes until departure. The cabin door remained open, but the jetway was now empty except for 2 security personnel waiting just out of sight. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you one final time to gather your belongings and deplane voluntarily. Prescott announced, voice sharp enough to cut glass. If you refuse, I'll have federal air marshals escort you off this aircraft. The TikTok live stream hit 15,000 viewers. Sophia whispered breathlessly to her audience. The flight attendant is giving her a final warning. This is getting intense. Comments poured in faster than anyone could read them, the screen blurring with reactions. She's about to get arrested. Captain looks mad. Bye, Felicia. Hope they ban her from flying. Aria adjusted baby Layla in her arms, checking her phone discreetly. 8 minutes until departure deadline. Her calm exterior belied the turmoil within. Each insult, each judging glance, each supportive nod toward Prescott. They all landed like physical blows. She had experienced discrimination before, but never so publicly. Never while holding her child. 8 minutes until what Prescott demanded her patience already thin. "Ma'am, whatever schedule you think you're keeping, it doesn't override federal aviation safety protocols." From the galley area, 2 air marshals emerged. Plain clothes, but unmistakable to anyone who knew the signs. Elena Martinez approached cautiously, hand positioned near her concealed weapon, while her partner David Wilson flanked from the other side. Their presence escalated the situation from passenger service issue to potential security threat. "Captain, what's the nature of the disturbance?" Elena asked, her voice professionally neutral. "Passenger non-compliance," Garcia replied curtly, refusing to deplane after crew assessment of disruptive behavior. The business passenger typing on the aviation forum paused to capture photos. His post was gaining traction among industry professionals. 200 shares, 847 comments growing by the minute. Prescott sensed her moment of triumph approaching. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced over the cabin intercom, "we apologize for the delay caused by an uncooperative passenger. We expect to resolve this situation momentarily." The announcement triggered a wave of passenger frustration. Voices rose throughout the cabin. "Just throw her off already. Some people have no consideration. I have a connection to make. This is ridiculous." The TikTok viewer count hit 25,000. Local news alerts pinged on phones across Chicago viral incident unfolding on SkyPoint Airways flight. Aria remained seated. Baby Layla now calm and curious about the surrounding commotion. Her composure was becoming almost eerie, like someone waiting for a predetermined moment. Inside, Aria was fighting her own battle. The desire to scream the truth, to identify herself, to end this humiliation, warring with the determination to let the situation fully expose itself. Air Marshal Wilson flanked Aria's other side. "Ma'am, we need you to gather your belongings and come with us voluntarily." "I need exactly 5 more minutes to resolve this situation," Aria said quietly. Garcia scoffed. "You need 0 minutes. This is a federal aircraft under my command, and you're creating a safety hazard." The elderly woman in pearls spoke loudly enough for the cameras. "Captain, I've been flying for 60 years. This kind of entitled behavior is exactly what's wrong with air travel today." Multiple passengers nodded agreement. The narrative was set disruptive, mother versus professional crew maintaining safety standards. But the business blogger noticed something others missed. His industry experience recognized subtle signs that didn't fit the narrative. He typed furiously, "Passenger shows 0 signs of actual distress. Too calm, too controlled. Something else happening here." Aria's phone buzzed insistently. The caller ID flashed briefly, SkyPoint corporate emergency line. She declined the call again. Prescott's eyes narrowed. "Who keeps calling you?" "Your baby daddy can't override federal aviation law from the ground." The insult drew approving chuckles from nearby passengers. James Whitfield raised his phone higher, ensuring he captured Prescott's authority. 6 minutes until mandatory departure, Garcia announced, checking his watch. "Ground security is boarding now." Through the aircraft windows, passengers could see airport security vehicles surrounding the plane. Emergency lights flashed. The situation had escalated beyond simple passenger removal. The TikTok live stream reached 32,000 viewers. Flight incident was trending nationally. Screenshots spread across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook showing the confrontation from multiple angles. Ground security officers boarded through the forward galley, their equipment jingling ominously. Restraints, radios, cameras, everything needed for forcible passenger removal. "Ma'am," the lead security officer announced by order of the flight captain and federal air marshals, "you're being removed from this aircraft. Please comply voluntarily." Aria looked around the cabin slowly, taking in the recording phones, the hostile faces, the overwhelming authority arrayed against her. Baby Layla gurgled softly, reaching toward the shiny security badge. In that moment, despite her careful control, Aria's eyes glistened with unshed tears. The hurt was real, no matter how well she hid it. 4 minutes, she said quietly. Garcia's face flushed with anger. You have 0 minutes. Officers, please escort this passenger and her child from the aircraft immediately. The security team moved closer. Passengers leaned forward, phones ready to capture the dramatic removal. The TikTok viewer count hit 38,000. But something in Aria's eyes made the smartest observers pause. She wasn't panicking, wasn't pleading, wasn't preparing to resist. She was waiting. Air Marshal Elena hesitated. Ma'am, if you have some kind of legitimate concern or documentation, now would be the time to Garcia cut her off sharply. We don't negotiate with disruptive passengers. Remove her now. Prescott stepped forward triumphantly. This is exactly why we have security protocols. Some people think they can manipulate situations with fake emergencies and social media theater. The cabin erupted in approval. Passengers applauded Prescott's firm stance. Comments on the live stream celebrated the crew's professionalism. Aria kissed baby Layla's forehead and whispered something inaudible. Then she reached for her phone with deliberate calm. 3 minutes, she said. Time's up, Garcia declared. Officers proceed with removal. As security moved to physically restrain her, Aria's eyes remained eerily calm. The storm was about to break, and she alone seemed prepared for what was coming. As security personnel approached Aria, the atmosphere in the cabin grew electric with anticipation. Phones recorded from every angle, passengers leaning forward to capture the moment a disruptive mother would be removed from their flight. Ma'am, I need you to stand up slowly with the child. The lead security officer directed his hand extended toward her arm. Aria didn't move. I have a right to see verification of my passenger status before being forcibly removed, she stated clearly, her voice carrying throughout the now silent cabin. Prescott laughed. Your rights ended when you refused crew instructions. This isn't a courtroom, honey. Elena Martinez stepped slightly forward, her training as an air marshal battling with her growing discomfort. Something about this situation felt wrong. The passenger was too composed, too certain. This wasn't the typical behavior of someone creating a disturbance. Captain Elena said carefully, standard protocol requires verification of passenger status before physical removal. Has her boarding pass been authenticated through the system? Garcia's expression darkened. Marshal Martinez. I appreciate your concern, but this is my aircraft. The passenger was identified as disruptive by senior crew. That's sufficient for removal. Sophia's TikTok live stream exploded past 40,000 viewers. Her commentary had shifted. Guys, this is getting really intense. Security is about to drag this mom and her baby off the plane, but she's just sitting there super calm. Something weird is happening. Comments flooded the stream. She's definitely getting arrested. Why isn't she scared? This flight attendant is on a power trip. The mom has to know something we don't. James Whitfield stood up, straightening his expensive suit. Captain, with all due respect, we're now delayed by nearly 15 minutes. Either remove her, or let's depart. Some of us have actual business to conduct today. His voice carried the entitlement of someone used to the world accommodating his schedule. A few passengers nearby nodded in agreement, but others were beginning to shift uncomfortably as the situation escalated beyond what seemed reasonable. Prescott nodded approvingly at Whitfield before turning to the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize again for this unfortunate delay. We're taking all necessary steps to ensure your safety and comfort. The elderly woman in pearls clapped lightly. It's about time airlines took control back from these people. The businessman who'd been documenting the incident on aviation forums had stopped typing. He was now staring at his screen, eyes widening at something he'd just received. He looked up at Aria, then at Prescott, then back at his screen. Captain, he called out suddenly, I strongly suggest you verify this passenger's status before proceeding. Garcia barely glanced his way. Sir, please remain seated. We're handling this situation. The aviation blogger hesitated, then continued typing frantically, his posts now taking on an urgent tone. Urgent update. Receiving industry messages about potential high-profile passenger on SkyPoint 631. Crew appears unaware. Developing situation. Outside the aircraft, more security vehicles had arrived. Through the windows, passengers could see airport personnel in animated conversation, some pointing at tablets and phones. The standard procedure for passenger removal was being watched by an unusually large ground crew. Aria's phone rang again. The screen displayed SkyPoint Emergency Protocol in red letters. This time, instead of declining, she let it ring, the sound cutting through the tense cabin. "Turn that off," Prescott snapped. "And stand up. Now." Elena exchanged glances with her partner, David Wilson. "Victoria," she said quietly, "maybe we should check her ticket status in the system before I've been flying these routes for 15 years. Prescott interrupted. "I know who belongs in my cabin." This woman entered with a screaming child, disrupted first-class passengers, and refused to comply with crew instructions. The decision has been made. The TikTok live stream hit 45,000 viewers. Local news stations in Chicago, Atlanta, and New York were picking up the story. #SkyPoint. Incident was trending in multiple cities. The security team moved closer to Aria, now flanking her on both sides. "Ma'am, we need to do this with minimal disruption," the lead officer said, his voice betraying uncertainty. "Please stand up with your child." Aria looked directly at the nearest camera, Sophia's phone. For a brief moment, her carefully maintained composure cracked. A single tear slid down her cheek as she clutched Layla closer. Then, as quickly as it appeared, the vulnerability was masked once more behind determined dignity. "I want everyone watching to understand what's happening," she said, her voice steady despite the momentary emotion. "I have a valid first-class ticket. My baby cried briefly during boarding. I was physically assaulted, called racial names, and now I'm being removed without proper verification." The statement landed like a bomb in the cabin. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably. "That's a lie," Prescott said loudly. "She's been disruptive since boarding." Her baby was screaming continuously. Actually came a quiet voice from across the aisle, a middle-aged woman who hadn't spoken until now. The baby only cried for a few minutes. Many infants cry during boarding because of ear pressure. Prescott's face flushed with anger. "Are you questioning my professional assessment?" "I'm stating what I observed," the woman replied calmly. Sophia zoomed in on Aria's face. "You guys, I've been recording this whole time and I don't think I ever saw this baby screaming continuously. It was just normal baby fussing." Garcia stepped forward, aware that the narrative was shifting. "That's enough. This removal is happening now. Security, proceed." The security officers placed hands on Aria's arms. "Ma'am, please stand up." Aria didn't resist, but she didn't comply either. She remained seated, Layla secure in her arms. Inside, her heart hammered. This wasn't about her pride anymore. This was about forcing accountability, about exposing what happened every day to people who didn't have her privileges. But that didn't make the public humiliation any less painful. 5 officers to remove one mother and her baby? She observed quietly. "Is this really SkyPoint Airways policy?" "Captain Garcia." Something in her tone. The calm certainty, the use of his full name and title made Garcia hesitate for just a moment. But Prescott pressed forward. "Remove her, now, or I'll file obstruction charges against her." The aviation blogger's phone pinged with an urgent notification. His eyes widened as he read it. He stood up abruptly. "Captain Garcia, Flight Attendant Prescott. I strongly advise you to stop this immediately and check with corporate. There's information you need to—" "Sir." "Sit down," Garcia commanded. "One more word and you'll be removed as well." The TikTok live stream reached 50,000 viewers. Sophia was narrating in an urgent whisper. The security guards are about to physically remove her. She's just sitting there holding her baby. This is insane. Aria glanced at her watch again. 2 minutes, she said softly. 2 minutes to verify my identity before you make a decision that cannot be undone. Garcia laughed harshly. Lady, the only thing that can't be undone is the delay you've already caused. Officers, remove her from this aircraft now. Use necessary force if required. The lead security officer hesitated, looking at Elena for guidance. The air marshal's professional instincts were screaming that something was very wrong with this situation. Captain Elena said firmly, I'm requesting a 60-second verification of passenger status through the SkyPoint system, standard protocol for disputed identity cases. Garcia turned to her furious. Marshal Martinez, this is my aircraft, and you're about to make a critical error, came a new voice from the entrance to the cabin. All heads turned to see a uniformed SkyPoint ground supervisor standing in the doorway. Tablet in hand, face pale with what looked like barely controlled panic. The sudden appearance of a ground supervisor created a momentary pause in the cabin. The man whose name badge read Thomas Willis stepped cautiously into first class, his eyes darting between Captain Garcia, Victoria Prescott, and Aria. Captain Willis said, his voice strained. We have an urgent communication from corporate headquarters regarding this flight. I need to speak with you privately. Garcia's expression darkened. Whatever it is can wait. We're in the middle of a passenger removal. Willis swallowed visibly. Sir, with respect, this cannot wait. It directly concerns the current situation. Prescott stepped forward aggressively. Thomas, we have a disruptive passenger who's refusing to comply with crew instructions. The decision has been made. The supervisor's eyes flickered to Aria, who remained seated, still cradling Layla with that unnerving calm. Flight Attendant Prescott. I strongly advise I don't need your advice, she interrupted. I need you to support my authority in this cabin. The tension was palpable. Security personnel remained positioned around Aria hands, hovering uncertainly, waiting for final instructions. The TikTok live stream hit 55,000 viewers as Sophia captured the standoff. Y'all, she whispered to her audience. The ground supervisor looks terrified. Something big is happening. James Whitfield had lost patience entirely. This is absurd. Either remove her or let's depart. This theater has gone on long enough. He checked his Rolex pointedly. My clients can't be kept waiting. Do you have any idea what my billable hour rate is? His entitled outburst drew several disapproving glances. An older gentleman across the aisle muttered, Maybe if you were less concerned about your billable hours and more concerned about basic human decency. Whitfield's face reddened. I paid for a premium experience and timely departure, not this circus. Elena Martinez stepped between the security officers and Aria. As a federal air marshal, I'm requesting a temporary hold on this removal pending identity verification. Garcia turned to her face, flushing. Marshal Martinez, you are overstepping your authority. Actually, Captain Willis interjected, his voice steadier now she's following proper protocol. And I need to speak with you immediately. He held up his tablet, showing Garcia a message that made the captain's face drain of color. Prescott, sensing her control of the situation slipping, made a final, desperate play. This passenger struck me when I approached her about her disruptive child, she announced loudly to the cabin. I was physically assaulted while performing my duties. The statement hung in the air for a moment before Sophia's voice cut through the silence. That's not what happened. I have the whole thing on video. You slapped her, not the other way around. Murmurs rippled through the cabin as passengers processed this contradiction. Several began reviewing their own recordings, frowns forming as they compared what they'd seen to what Prescott had just claimed. The aviation blogger stood up again. I've just received confirmation from multiple industry sources. Captain Garcia, Flight Attendant Prescott, you need to check passenger verification immediately. Prescott whirled toward him. Sit down. You have no authority in this cabin. Neither do you, when you're violating federal aviation law, came Aria's calm voice. She hadn't moved, hadn't raised her voice, but her words carried throughout the cabin with devastating clarity. Layla chose that moment to gurgle happily, reaching toward the shiny buttons on Elena's jacket. The innocent sound created a jarring contrast to the tension enveloping the adults around her. Garcia looked between Willis's tablet, Prescott's increasingly desperate expression, and Aria's composed face. Something was very wrong, and he was beginning to suspect he'd miscalculated severely. "Marshal Martinez," he said slowly. "Please verify the passenger's identity through the system." Captain Prescott protested. "We've already." "That's enough, Victoria," he cut her off sharply. Elena pulled out a secure tablet and approached Aria. "Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass and ID, please?" With one hand still supporting Layla, Aria reached into her bag and retrieved her boarding pass and ID card. Elena scanned them into her device, then waited as the system processed the information. Her eyes widened slightly as she read the results. "Captain," she said carefully, "the passenger is verified in the system as Aria Reynolds Gold Status Executive Account Holder. Her ticket for Seat 2A is valid." Prescott shook her head vehemently. "That's impossible. She must have hacked the system or purchased a fraudulent ticket. I know our Gold Status members." The elderly woman in pearls nodded in agreement. "She doesn't look like she belongs in first class." That statement hung in the air, its implications unmistakable. Several passengers shifted uncomfortably, suddenly aware of how their assumptions might be perceived in the recordings circulating around them. Sophia zoomed in on Aria again. "For everyone watching, the air marshal just confirmed this woman has a valid ticket and gold status, but they were trying to remove her anyway. And that other passenger just said she doesn't look like she belongs in first class. Make of that what you will." The comment section on the live stream exploded. "This is racial profiling live on camera. They're only backing down because they got caught. That flight attendant lied about being assaulted. SkyPoint is going down for this." Willis stepped closer to Garcia, showing him something else on the tablet that made the captain's face go from pale to ashen. "Ms. Prescott." Garcia said, his voice now unsteady. "Please return to the galley immediately." "But Captain, now Victoria." Prescott looked around the cabin, sensing her authority evaporating. The narrative she'd constructed was unraveling thread by thread. She straightened her uniform jacket, a gesture that now seemed more defensive than authoritative, and retreated to the galley. The security team began backing away from Aria, their purpose now unclear. James Whitfield, who had been so vocal in his support of removing Aria, suddenly became engrossed in his phone, avoiding eye contact with anyone. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that he had aligned himself with the wrong side of a situation that was clearly being documented extensively. "I have an important email to send," he muttered, fingers frantically typing. The truth was, he was messaging his assistant to reschedule his meetings and trying to delete his earlier social media comments about the incident. The aviation blogger was now openly messaging with industry contacts, his expression growing increasingly alarmed with each exchange. "Captain," he called out, "corporate headquarters is aware of this situation. It's being monitored at the highest levels." Garcia nodded grimly, his demeanor now completely transformed. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the cabin, "I apologize for the confusion. There has been a misunderstanding regarding this passenger's status. We will be departing shortly." Aria finally spoke again. "Captain Garcia, this wasn't confusion. Your flight attendant physically struck me while I was holding my child. She made racist remarks about my baby daddy. She lied about me assaulting her, and you were willing to have me forcibly removed without checking my ticket." Her words, spoken without anger but with unmistakable authority, silenced the cabin again. The TikTok live stream reached 60,000 viewers. Sophia whispered to her audience, "You guys, this is wild. They verified she belongs here, and now they're just trying to sweep everything under the rug." From the galley, Prescott reappeared, phone in hand. Her face had lost all color. "Captain," she said, voice barely audible. "Corporate is on the line. For you. Urgent." Garcia took the phone and stepped into the galley. The cabin could hear his voice initially defensive, then increasingly subdued. "Yes, sir. I understand. Yes, sir. Immediately, sir." When he returned, his captain's authority seemed to have diminished significantly. He approached Aria directly, standing a respectful distance away. "Ms. Reynolds," he said formally on behalf of SkyPoint Airways, "I apologize for the misunderstanding. Your gold status has been confirmed, and you are of course welcome to remain in your seat for this flight." Aria looked at him steadily. "Captain Garcia, I was physically struck by your flight attendant while holding my child. She made racially charged comments about my baby daddy and accused me of stealing my ticket. Over 60,000 people are watching this situation unfold. Do you really believe misunderstanding addresses what has happened here?" The question hung in the air. Garcia had no answer. Willis, the ground supervisor, approached cautiously. "Ms. Reynolds Corporate has requested that I personally ensure your comfort for the remainder of your journey. Is there anything you need at this moment?" "Yes," Aria replied calmly. "I need accountability. Not apologies, not special treatment, but actual consequences for what has occurred." The 1-minute mark had arrived, and something significant was about to change. Captain Garcia stood frozen in the aisle, the gravity of the situation finally dawning on him. Prescott hovered near the galley, her earlier confidence replaced by growing dread. The security officers had retreated to the edges of the cabin, their presence now more uncertain than authoritative. Aria shifted baby Layla to her other arm, the child blissfully unaware of the tension surrounding her. "Captain Garcia," Aria said clearly, "I'd like to speak directly with your corporate office. Now." Garcia nodded stiffly. "Of course, Ms. Reynolds. I'll have them contact you immediately." "That won't be necessary," Aria replied. "I already have them on the line." She reached for her phone, which had been ringing persistently throughout the confrontation. The cabin fell silent as Aria pressed the speakerphone button. "This is Aria," she said calmly. "Aria." The voice that came through was urgent professional. "This is Vanessa from Corporate Communications. We've been trying to reach you for 20 minutes. Are you and Layla okay?" For the first time, Aria's voice wavered slightly. "Physically, we're okay, but I've been slapped by a flight attendant, called names, accused of stealing my ticket. They almost dragged me off the plane, Vanessa, while I was holding Layla." The momentary crack in her composure revealed the toll the ordeal had taken despite her outward calm. Several passengers looked away, suddenly uncomfortable with their role as spectators to her humiliation. There was a brief silence on the line. When Vanessa spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming carefully controlled. "Is Captain Garcia present?" "Yes, he's standing right in front of me. And flight attendant Victoria Prescott. She's here too." Another brief silence. "Aria Dominic has been notified and is on his way to the communications center. He's asked to speak directly with everyone involved. Can you stay on the line?" The name Dominic sent a visible ripple through the cabin. The aviation blogger's eyes widened as he frantically typed on his phone. James Whitfield, who had been so vocal about his important business meeting, suddenly looked like he wanted to disappear into his seat. "I'll stay on the line," Aria confirmed. "We have approximately 60,000 witnesses at this point, according to the TikTok live stream." Sophia, still recording, steadily whispered to her audience. "You guys, I think we're about to find out why she's been so calm this whole time. Something big is happening." Captain Garcia cleared his throat. "Ms. Reynolds, perhaps we could continue this conversation somewhere more private." Aria looked at him steadily. "Captain Garcia, privacy was not a consideration when your crew member slapped me in front of an entire cabin. It was not a consideration when she made comments about my baby daddy, or when she accused me of stealing my ticket. This conversation will happen right here with all these witnesses and cameras." Garcia had no response. The power dynamic had shifted completely, and everyone in the cabin could feel it. Thomas Willis, the ground supervisor, approached with his tablet. "Ms. Reynolds, we've prepared a different aircraft for your journey to Atlanta. A private company jet is being readied now." "That won't be necessary," Aria said. "I'll be completing my journey on this aircraft in the seat I purchased." Prescott, who had been maintaining a careful distance, finally spoke. "Ms. Reynolds, I apologize for any misunderstanding that may have—" "Stop," Aria said, her voice calm but unyielding. "You physically struck me while I was holding my baby. You made racist comments. You lied about me assaulting you. Those aren't misunderstandings. They're deliberate actions for which you will be held accountable." The phone in Aria's hand crackled. "Aria, Dominic is here now," Vanessa's voice announced. The cabin collectively held its breath. "Aria." A new voice came through the speaker, deep and commanding. "Are you and Layla safe?" Aria's composure finally cracked. A single tear rolled down her cheek as she replied, "We're fine, Dom. We're okay. She took a deep breath. It's been a lot. The momentary vulnerability made her subsequent strength all the more powerful. She squared her shoulders and continued, physically unharmed at least. "Put me on speaker, please. I want to address everyone on that aircraft. You already are on speaker. Captain Garcia, Flight Attendant Prescott, and approximately 65,000 live stream viewers are listening." There was a brief pause. Then the voice returned, now filled with barely controlled fury. "This is Dominic Reynolds, Chief Executive Officer of SkyPoint Airways." "Who is the captain of this aircraft?" Garcia stepped forward, swallowing hard. "This is Captain Richard Garcia, sir." "Captain Garcia. I'm looking at a live stream showing my wife being assaulted by your crew subjected to racial slurs and nearly removed from my aircraft despite holding a valid first-class ticket. Explain yourself." The words "my wife" and "my aircraft" landed like thunderbolts in the cabin. Gasps and murmurs spread through the passengers as realization dawned. Aria Reynolds wasn't just any passenger, she was married to the CEO and owner of the entire airline. Garcia's face went completely white. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding regarding—" "A misunderstanding," Dominic's voice cut through like steel. "Captain Garcia, I'm watching video footage of my wife being slapped while holding our daughter. I'm hearing a flight attendant make comments about her baby daddy. I'm seeing security personnel prepare to physically remove her from her seat. Which part of that is a misunderstanding?" Sophia, still filming, steadily whispered to her TikTok audience. "Holy crap, you guys. She's the CEO's wife." The flight attendant slapped the owner's wife. The live stream exploded past 70,000 viewers as the revelation spread across social media. #SkyPoint disaster began trending nationally. Dominic continued, his voice resonating through the cabin. "Is Victoria Prescott present?" Prescott stepped forward, trembling visibly. Yes, sir. I'm here." "Ms. Prescott, you struck my wife in the face while she was holding our child. You made racist comments. You attempted to have her removed from the aircraft. You then lied and claimed she assaulted you. Have I missed anything?" Prescott's voice failed her. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Aria shifted slightly in her seat, adjusting Layla's blanket. "Dom," she said softly. Dropping the formal tone, she also suggested I stole my ticket because people like me don't belong in first class. "Is that true, Ms. Prescott?" Dominic demanded. Prescott found her voice, though it was barely audible. "Sir, I was following protocol for disruptive passengers. The infant was crying, and my daughter was crying because her ears hurt during pressure changes." Dominic interrupted. "That's what babies do, Ms. Prescott. It doesn't justify assault, racism, or discrimination." The elderly woman in pearls who had been so supportive of Prescott earlier was now staring at her own hands, avoiding eye contact with anyone. James Whitfield had pulled out his phone and appeared to be canceling something, perhaps the important business meeting he'd been so concerned about. Captain Garcia Dominic continued, "When did you become aware that my wife was on your aircraft?" Garcia cleared his throat. "Sir, I was informed by ground control approximately 3 minutes ago, and before that you were willing to have her forcibly removed based solely on Flight Attendant Prescott's assessment without verifying her ticket status or identity. I trusted my senior crew's judgment, sir. Even after multiple passengers suggested verification, even after an air marshal requested it, even after a ground supervisor attempted to alert you, Garcia had no answer." Dominic's voice became, if possible, even more controlled. "Captain Garcia, you are suspended, effective immediately. Flight Attendant Prescott, you are terminated effective immediately. Both of you will remain on that aircraft until federal investigators arrive to take your statements regarding assault charges." The cabin went completely silent. Even baby Layla seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, her curious eyes looking around at the shocked faces. Mr. Willis Dominic continued. The ground supervisor stepped forward nervously. "Yes, sir. You will personally escort Ms. Prescott and Captain Garcia to the crew lounge where they will await federal officers. You will then return to ensure my wife and daughter's comfort for the remainder of their journey." "Yes, sir." "Immediately, sir." Elena Martinez, the air marshal who had tried to intervene, stepped forward. "Mr. Reynolds, Air Marshal Elena Martinez, I'd like to apologize for not acting more decisively to prevent this situation from escalating." Marshal Martinez. Dominic acknowledged, "I appreciate your eventual intervention. We'll discuss protocol improvements at a later time." The revelation of Aria's identity had transformed the cabin atmosphere completely. Passengers who had been vocally supportive of Prescott now looked mortified. Those who had silently witnessed the discrimination now seemed ashamed of their inaction. Sophia continued her commentary. "This is absolutely wild. The flight attendant and captain are being fired on the spot. The CEO sounds furious." Dominic's voice softened slightly. "Aria, love, are you sure you want to continue on this flight? The corporate jet is ready." Aria's reply was quiet but firm. "I need to finish what I started, Dom. This isn't just about me. It's about what happens to people who don't have someone like you in their corner." The statement resonated throughout the cabin, a powerful reminder that the discrimination Aria had faced was something many passengers experienced without the protection of privilege or position. "I understand," Dominic replied. "I'll see you in Atlanta. Federal officers are already on their way to the aircraft. I love you both." "We love you too," Aria said, ending the call. The confrontation had reached its climax, but the story was far from over. As Aria sat back in her seat, cradling Layla close, the magnitude of what had just transpired began to sink in for everyone aboard Flight 631. The cabin of Flight 631 remained suspended in stunned silence. Victoria Prescott stood frozen in the aisle, her career and reputation disintegrating in real time. Captain Garcia had retreated to the galley, his face ashen as he processed the consequences of his decisions. Security personnel who had been prepared to forcibly remove Aria now awkwardly backed toward the exits, their purpose evaporated. Sophia's TikTok livestream had exploded to 85,000 viewers. Her whispered commentary continued. "Guys, the CEO just fired them both live while everyone watched. This is the most insane thing I've ever witnessed." The hashtags, #SkyPoint Disaster and #Aria Reynolds were trending nationally. Major news networks had picked up the story, with breaking news alerts appearing on phones throughout the cabin. Air Marshal Elena Martinez approached Aria respectfully. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'd like to formally apologize for my role in this situation. I should have intervened sooner." Aria nodded graciously. "Thank you, Marshal Martinez. Your request for verification was the first moment anyone in authority questioned what was happening. That matters." The elderly woman in pearls, who had been so vocal in support of Prescott, now spoke in a subdued voice. I owe you an apology as well, Mrs. Reynolds. My comments were inappropriate and prejudiced. Aria looked at her steadily. They were, and I appreciate your acknowledgement of that fact. James Whitfield sat rigidly in his seat, perspiration beading on his forehead. The investment banker, who had so confidently dismissed Aria's dignity for the sake of his schedule, now found himself in a deeply uncomfortable position. His arrogance had evaporated, replaced by the dawning realization that his behavior had been captured and would likely follow him beyond this flight. After several moments of internal struggle, he leaned forward. Mrs. Reynolds, he began stiffly, I behaved inappropriately. My comments were uncalled for. Mr. Whitfield, Aria replied, your apology is noted. But I wonder, would you have reconsidered your position if I were just another black mother without connections? Or is it only my husband's title that makes my dignity worth respecting? Whitfield had no response to her pointed question. He retreated into uncomfortable silence, the truth of her words hanging in the air between them. Thomas Willis returned from escorting a federal officer onto the plane. The officer, a stern-faced woman in a dark suit, approached Victoria Prescott. Ms. Prescott, I need to take your statement regarding the alleged assault of a passenger. Please come with me. Prescott finally found her voice, though it cracked with desperation. This is a mistake. I was following company protocol for disruptive passengers. I've worked for SkyPoint for 15 years, Ms. Prescott. The federal officer replied calmly. Multiple videos show you striking a passenger who was holding an infant. That's a federal offense regardless of company protocol. Please come with me now. As Prescott was led away, her shoulders slumped in defeat, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. A second federal officer approached Captain Garcia, who followed without protest, his captain's authority now a hollow shell. The aviation blogger who had been documenting the incident stood up as they passed. For the record, he said clearly, I submitted 3 separate alerts to SkyPoint's corporate system identifying Mrs. Reynolds as a high-status passenger. All were ignored. This new revelation rippled through the cabin. The systematic failure hadn't been just Prescott and Garcia. Multiple safeguards had been overridden or ignored. Thomas Willis returned to Aria's seat, visibly nervous. Mrs. Reynolds, a new flight crew is boarding now. We'll be ready for departure in approximately 15 minutes. Is there anything you need in the meantime? Aria adjusted Layla in her arms, the baby now drowsy after the excitement. Mr. Willis, what I need is for this incident to lead to meaningful change. Not just consequences for individuals, but transformation of the entire approach. In the privacy of her thoughts, Aria was finally allowing herself to process what had happened. The public humiliation, the assumptions, the slap, all of it had taken a toll she'd carefully hidden. She held Layla a little closer, drawing strength from her daughter's innocent presence. Sophia, still recording, approached cautiously. Mrs. Reynolds, I'm Sophia Alvarez. I've been live streaming this whole situation. Would you like to say anything directly to the people watching? Aria considered for a moment, then looked directly into the camera. What happened today isn't rare. It's just rarely documented. I didn't want to use my husband's name or position. I wanted the system to work the way it should for everyone, regardless of who they know or who they're married to. Remember that for every person like me who has protection, there are thousands who don't. Her words, delivered without rehearsal but with unmistakable authenticity, resonated deeply. The viewer count hit 90,000 as her statement spread across social media. A new captain entered the cabin, his expression professionally neutral despite the extraordinary circumstances. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Captain Michael Landry. I'll be taking command of Flight 631 to Atlanta. We apologize for the delay and expect to be underway shortly. As he passed Aria's seat, he nodded respectfully. Mrs. Reynolds, it's an honor to have you aboard. The shift in tone was palpable. Crew members who had been avoiding eye contact with Aria now approached with offers of assistance. Passengers who had been judgmental now looked away in shame. The power dynamics had been completely inverted. The aviation blogger received another message on his phone. His eyes widened as he read it. Breaking news, he announced to no one in particular. SkyPoint Airways has just issued an emergency statement acknowledging the incident on Flight 631 and announcing the immediate implementation of new anti-discrimination protocols across all flights effective today. The corporate response had been swift and decisive, a clear signal that this incident would not be buried or minimized. Dominic Reynolds was ensuring that the consequences extended far beyond the individuals directly involved. As the new crew prepared for departure, Aria finally relaxed slightly, the tension of the confrontation easing from her shoulders. She kissed Layla's forehead, gently whispering words of love that made the baby smile. Sophia captured the moment on her live stream. "You guys, after everything that happened, look at her strength, taking care of her baby through all of this." The comments section overflowed with support. Queen energy. She handled that with such grace. Respect to her for staying on that flight. This is going to change SkyPoint forever. The turning point had arrived. What had begun as discrimination caught on camera had transformed into a watershed moment for corporate accountability. As Flight 631 finally prepared for takeoff nearly 90 minutes behind schedule, everyone aboard knew they had witnessed something historic, a moment when power confronted prejudice and was forced to acknowledge its failings. And through it all, Aria Reynolds had never lost her dignity. That perhaps was the most powerful statement of all. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of Flight 631 had undergone a complete transformation. Where tension and hostility had reigned minutes earlier, now an almost reverent quiet settled over the passengers. The revelation of Aria Reynolds' identity had rewritten every assumption and judgment made during the confrontation. Captain Michael Landry's voice came smoothly over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've been cleared for departure. Flight attendants, please prepare the cabin." The new flight crew moved with heightened professionalism, their usual routines performed with an extra layer of attentiveness. Every eye in the cabin darted occasionally toward seat 2A, where Aria sat calmly with baby Layla now sleeping peacefully against her chest. Sophia's TikTok livestream had maintained its connection throughout the preparations for takeoff, her viewership hovering around 95,000. Major news networks had picked up the story, with aviation correspondents providing live updates on the unfolding corporate response. "You guys," Sophia whispered to her audience. "They just announced that Victoria Prescott has been escorted from the airport by federal officers. Captain Garcia is being interviewed by aviation authorities. This is huge." As the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate, James Whitfield, who had been so vocal about his important business in Atlanta, leaned forward hesitantly. "Mrs. Reynolds," he began, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "I want to apologize again for my comments earlier. I was inconsiderate." Aria regarded him steadily. "Mr. Whitfield, your apology is noted. But I'd suggest reflecting on why you felt comfortable dismissing a mother's dignity until you learned who her husband was." Whitfield flushed and retreated into his seat, properly chastened. His phone buzzed with an incoming message, the first of many notifications from colleagues who'd seen him in the viral footage. The text simply read, "James, we need to talk about what's circulating online. Call me ASAP." The elderly woman in pearls, who had earlier complained about modern parenting standards, now looked genuinely distressed. "I'm truly sorry, dear," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I judged you harshly based on nothing of substance." "Thank you for acknowledging that," Aria replied with quiet dignity. "It's never too late to recognize our biases." As the aircraft taxied toward the runway, phones throughout the cabin lit up with breaking news alerts. The aviation blogger read his screen and let out a low whistle. SkyPoint shares are down 6% on news of the incident he announced to no one in particular. Corporate is in emergency response mode. Thomas Willis, who had remained aboard to ensure Aria's comfort, approached with a tablet. Mrs. Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds asked me to show you this. It's the official company statement being released to media outlets now. Aria took the tablet and read the statement displayed on screen. SkyPoint Airways acknowledges a serious incident occurred today on Flight 631 from Chicago to Atlanta involving discrimination against a passenger. We have zero tolerance for such behavior and have taken immediate action, including termination of the involved employees. A comprehensive review of our training procedures and customer service protocols is underway. SkyPoint is committed to creating an environment where all passengers are treated with dignity and respect. Sophia, reading over Aria's shoulder, whispered to her livestream SkyPoint just released an official statement admitting everything. They're not even trying to cover it up. Air Marshal Elena Martinez, who would remain aboard for the flight to Atlanta, sat nearby with a thoughtful expression. Reynolds, she said quietly. What happened today will change protocols for air marshals across the industry. We're trained to trust crew assessments, but this incident reveals a critical flaw in that approach. Aria nodded. The problem isn't just about individuals making bad decisions. It's about a system that makes those decisions seem reasonable and justified. As the aircraft accelerated down the runway, baby Layla stirred slightly at the changing pressure, but remained asleep, comforted by her mother's familiar heartbeat. The moment of weightlessness, as the plane lifted off, seemed somehow symbolic, a physical manifestation of the gravity of what had occurred. Alone with her thoughts, as the plane climbed toward cruising altitude, Aria finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her hand trembled slightly as she stroked Layla's cheek. The public composure had taken a toll, being slapped, insulted, nearly removed from the plane while everyone watched. For a moment she closed her eyes, letting a tear slide silently down her cheek. No one saw this brief moment of private emotion, except Layla, who slept on blissfully unaware. At cruising altitude, the new senior flight attendant approached with exceptional deference. Mrs. Reynolds, is there anything at all I can get for you or your daughter? Just some water? Thank you, Aria replied. And perhaps a warm blanket for Layla. The request was fulfilled almost instantly with 3 different crew members rushing to assist. The overcorrection was noticeable almost uncomfortably, so highlighting how differently Aria was being treated now that her identity was known. Sophia's live stream continued, though, at a lower volume out of respect for the sleeping baby. You guys, we're in the air now. Mrs. Reynolds is being treated like royalty, which is how she should have been treated from the beginning, right? But it's kind of sad that it took finding out she's the owner's wife. The comments section agreed vehemently. Why should anyone need power to be treated with basic dignity? Imagine how they treat people without connections. This is why we need cameras everywhere. Aria's phone vibrated with an incoming message. She checked it discreetly, a small smile crossing her face for the first time since the ordeal began. The message was from Dominic Atlanta team standing by. Love you both. So proud of how you handled this. Change is happening already. The aviation blogger received another industry update, his eyes widening as he read it. SkyPoint just announced the immediate suspension of 3 additional staff members who failed to respond to identity verification alerts, he said loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. They're cleaning house. Thomas Willis nodded solemnly. It's true. The gatekeepers who ignored verification requests the ground crew supervisor who initially dismissed alerts. Accountability is extending beyond just the cabin crew. The elderly woman in pearls leaned forward again. Was this some sort of test? Did you board looking like that intentionally to see how you'd be treated? Aria looked at her directly. No, ma'am. This is simply how I dress when traveling with my daughter. Comfortable, practical clothing. The fact that you assume it was a test rather than just a mother traveling with her child reveals the very bias at the heart of this situation. The woman flushed and sat back, properly chastised. An hour into the flight, with the initial shock subsiding, passengers began discussing the incident in hushed tones. The power shift wasn't just about Aria's revealed status, it was about the exposed biases that had guided everyone's behavior. Passengers who had judged her crew members, who had dismissed her security personnel, who had prepared to remove her, all were now confronting uncomfortable truths about their assumptions, Mrs. Reynolds. Sophia said hesitantly during a quiet moment. My viewers are asking if you plan to travel incognito to test the airline. No, Sophia. Aria replied, her voice soft but clear. I'm just a mother who wanted to travel comfortably with her child. What happened today happens all the time to people who look like me. The only difference is that most don't have the protection I have. Most don't get vindication and accountability. As the aircraft cruised toward Atlanta, the corporate response continued to unfold on the ground below. Emergency meetings were convened, press statements, drafted, policy changes implemented, all because discrimination had finally targeted someone with the power to demand accountability. The true revelation wasn't just about Aria's identity. It was about the stark difference between how people are treated when they're perceived as powerless versus when they're recognized as powerful, and what that difference reveals about the society we've built. As Flight 631 passed over the Kentucky-Tennessee border, the full scope of what had transpired began to crystallize, not just within the aircraft, but across the nation. Sophia's TikTok livestream had surpassed 120,000 concurrent viewers, and clips from her footage were being broadcast on major news networks. The hashtag SkyPoint Discrimination had become the top trending topic nationwide. Aria's phone buzzed with a message from Dominic CNN and MSNBC covering the story live. Fox News just picked it up too. Your strength is changing the narrative completely. Thomas Willis approached with an update, his expression a mixture of deference and concern. Mrs. Reynolds, I've just been informed that Victoria Prescott has released a statement claiming she was following established protocols for disruptive passengers. Corporate Communications is preparing a response. Aria nodded thoughtfully. Of course she would say that. It's easier to blame protocols than to acknowledge personal bias. The aviation blogger, who had been monitoring industry channels throughout the flight, stood up and approached Aria's seat. Mrs. Reynolds, Jason Miller from Aviation Today. I've been documenting this incident from the beginning. Would you mind if I ask you a few questions? The industry needs to understand what happened here. I don't mind, Mr. Miller, Aria replied. But please keep your voice down. Layla is sleeping. Miller nodded and sat in the empty seat across the aisle. Thank you. First, I want to confirm, did you intentionally travel without identifying yourself as the wife of SkyPoint's CEO? I traveled as myself. Aria Reynolds, mother to Layla, first-class ticket holder and gold status member. My relationship to Dominic is not something I hide, but it's also not something I announce when boarding an aircraft. And the casual attire, Aria raised an eyebrow. Mr. Miller, I'm traveling with a 6-month-old baby. Would you suggest I do so in a business suit and heels? Miller had the grace to look embarrassed. No, of course not. I apologize for the implication. He redirected. When Flight Attendant Prescott first approached you, what exactly happened? Layla was crying because of the cabin pressure change, which is normal for infants. Ms. Prescott immediately accused me of disrupting the cabin. When I attempted to explain, she struck me across the face while I was holding my daughter. The statement, delivered without emotion but with absolute clarity, caused several nearby passengers to wince. The physical assault, now clearly established as fact rather than allegation, was indefensible. And after striking you, she made racially charged comments. She referred to my baby daddy and suggested I had stolen my ticket because People like me don't belong in first class." Miller shook his head in disbelief, and Captain Garcia supported these actions without verification. Captain Garcia never once asked to see my boarding pass or ID. He accepted Ms. Prescott's assessment without question and authorized my removal by security personnel. As Aria spoke, her words were being transcribed and shared across social media by Sophia's viewers. The unvarnished truth spoken without anger but with unflinching precision was devastating in its simplicity. The elderly woman in pearls, who had been listening intently, suddenly spoke up. "I supported that flight attendant," she said, her voice thick with regret. "I judged you based on how you looked, not your behavior." She paused, gathering courage. "I'm Elizabeth Thornton, and I was wrong. I was completely wrong." Aria acknowledged her with a nod. "Thank you for that admission, Mrs. Thornton. It takes courage to recognize our biases." Miller continued his documentation. "Mrs. Reynolds, were you surprised by how quickly the situation escalated?" "Not surprised, Mr. Miller. Disappointed, perhaps, but this experience isn't unique to me. It's just that most people who face this kind of treatment don't have the protection of being married to a CEO. This perspective that Aria's experience was not exceptional but rather a documented case of what many experience without recourse resonated deeply with viewers. Comments on Sophia's livestream reflected this realization. This happens every day to people without cameras or connections. The only difference is she had power to fight back. Imagine all the times this happens with no consequences. Air Marshal Elena Martinez, who had been observing, quietly joined the conversation. "Mrs. Reynolds, as someone tasked with maintaining aircraft safety, I find it deeply troubling that security protocols were weaponized in this way. Your experience exposes serious flaws in our approach." "Marshal Martinez security is only as unbiased as the people implementing it," Aria replied. "When we claim protocol without examining the biases informing our judgment, we're simply institutionalizing discrimination." The new captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Atlanta. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened." As the aircraft began its descent, Thomas Willis received another update on his tablet. His eyes widened as he read it. "Mrs. Reynolds' SkyPoint stock has fallen nearly 8%. The board has called an emergency meeting." James Whitfield, who had remained silent after his earlier chastisement, couldn't contain his shock. 8%. That's hundreds of millions in market value. "Yes, Mr. Whitfield," Aria responded evenly. "That's what happens when corporations allow discrimination to flourish. Eventually it affects the bottom line." Sophia, still documenting everything, whispered to her audience, "You guys, the company is losing millions of dollars over this. All because they let a flight attendant slap a black mom holding a baby." As the aircraft descended through clouds toward Atlanta, Aria gently adjusted Layla, who was beginning to wake up. The baby blinked sleepily, entirely unaware that she had been at the center of a national conversation about power, race, and accountability. Miller asked one final question. "Mrs. Reynolds, what do you hope comes from this incident?" Aria considered for a moment. "I hope for change that goes beyond this one flight. I want the next mother who boards a plane with her crying baby to be offered help, not judgment, regardless of her skin color or the clothes she's wearing. I want verification to become standard before any passenger is removed. And I want everyone to understand that what happened to me is what happens to countless others who don't have my advantages." Her answer, captured and shared instantly with hundreds of thousands of viewers, crystallized the true exposure of the day, not just the behavior of Victoria Prescott or the failures of Captain Garcia, but the entire structure that allowed such discrimination to seem normal until it targeted someone with power. As the landing gear deployed with a mechanical thud, The aircraft prepared for touchdown in Atlanta, but the reverberations of what had occurred would continue long after wheels touched tarmac. The exposure had just begun. In the final minutes before landing, Aria looked down at Layla's peaceful face and felt a complex mixture of emotions. Pride in standing her ground, anger at the treatment she'd received, determination to create change, and beneath it all a deep sadness that her daughter was growing up in a world where such incidents were commonplace. "It shouldn't have to be this way," she whispered to Layla too quietly for anyone else to hear. "But I promise you, I'll do everything I can to make it better." The controlled chaos of the immediate aftermath unfolded across multiple locations simultaneously. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, federal investigators continued gathering statements from Flight 631 passengers. At SkyPoint's corporate headquarters in Dallas, emergency teams worked to implement the comprehensive response plan, and across social media, the incident continued to reverberate as millions shared, commented on, and debated what had transpired. By 6:00 p.m. Eastern Time, just hours after landing, the consequences were already materializing with remarkable speed. Victoria Prescott's formal arrest was captured by airport security cameras. The footage showing the former flight attendant being escorted in handcuffs through employee areas leaked almost immediately to news outlets. Her expression, a mixture of shock and indignation, became an instantly recognizable image across the internet. Captain Richard Garcia, though not arrested, was placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation. His captain's credentials were temporarily suspended by the FAA, a rare and serious action that effectively grounded him regardless of SkyPoint's internal decisions. In the private airport lounge where Aria and Dominic Reynolds had established a temporary command center, Thomas Willis provided continuous updates on the unfolding situation. Ms. Prescott has been formally charged with assault and battery under federal jurisdiction. Bail hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. He paused before continuing. And there's more. 3 passengers have come forward with previous complaints against her, all involving similar treatment of minority passengers. Those cases were apparently settled quietly. Dominic's expression hardened. Find every complaint ever filed against her, even if it was dismissed or settled. I want to know if this was a pattern that we failed to address. Aria, who had been focused on keeping Layla comfortable amid the commotion, looked up. It's almost certainly a pattern. People don't suddenly develop these behaviors in isolated incidents. In a quiet moment alone together with Layla, finally napping in a portable crib, Aria finally let her guard down completely. Her hands trembled as she accepted the cup of tea Dominic offered. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if I were just another passenger," she said softly. "If I didn't have you, if there weren't cameras, if I couldn't prove who I was, I would have been dragged off that plane in handcuffs, Dom, with our baby." Dominic sat beside her, taking her hands in his. "But you weren't. You held your ground. You forced them to expose themselves. That doesn't make it hurt any less," she replied, a tear finally escaping. Being slapped, being humiliated in front of all those people, hearing their laughter when she made that baby daddy comment. Her voice broke. I had to sit there and take it, knowing that showing any emotion would just reinforce their narrative. He pulled her close, his anger at what she'd endured palpable. "You shouldn't have had to be so strong. That's the part that kills me." After allowing herself this brief moment of vulnerability, Aria straightened her shoulders. "We have work to do," she said, wiping her eyes. "This can't just be about Victoria Prescott or Richard Garcia." Across the terminal, Sofia Alvarez was experiencing her own form of aftermath. Her TikTok account had gained over 600,000 followers in a single day. News organizations from CNN to the BBC were requesting interviews. Her phone had died twice from constant notifications, and airport officials had provided her with a private space to recharge and process what had happened. "I just started recording because it seemed wrong," she explained to a CNN reporter who had managed to secure a brief interview. I thought I was documenting a disruptive passenger, but then I realized I was witnessing something much bigger. Discrimination happening in real time, caught on camera. Her perspective evolving from initial judgment to growing unease to full documentation of injustice resonated with viewers who had experienced similar shifts in their own understanding of bias and privilege. Meanwhile, James Whitfield, the businessman who had been so vocal about his important meeting, slipped quietly through the terminal head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might recognize him from the viral footage. His supportive comments toward Prescott had been captured clearly, his dismissive attitude toward Aria preserved for posterity. The digital footprint would follow him long after the immediate crisis passed. His phone had been buzzing constantly with messages from colleagues and clients who had recognized him in the footage. One text from his firm's managing partner was particularly blunt: board meeting tomorrow. Your conduct on SkyPoint 631 will be discussed. Prepare to explain yourself. Elizabeth Thornton. The elderly woman who had made critical comments about modern parenting took a different approach. After giving her statement to investigators, she approached a gathering of reporters with surprising determination. I was wrong, she stated clearly, her voice wavering slightly. I judged that young mother harshly without knowing anything about her situation. I supported that flight attendant's terrible behavior. I'm 82 years old, but that's no excuse for the prejudice I displayed today. I'm deeply ashamed, and I'm grateful for the chance to acknowledge my mistakes publicly. Her candid admission of bias, rare in an environment where most preferred to deny or minimize such behaviors, earned significant attention in its own right. Several news outlets highlighted her statement as an example of accountability that crossed generational lines. By early evening, Dominic Reynolds delivered his formal video address to the public. Standing alongside Aria with baby Layla in her arms, he spoke with a powerful combination of corporate authority and personal emotion. Today, my wife, Aria, and our daughter, Layla, experienced treatment that no passenger should ever face on any airline, especially not on SkyPoint Airways. She was physically assaulted by a crew member, subjected to racial comments, and nearly forcibly removed from an aircraft, despite having a valid first-class ticket and gold status with our airline. I want to be absolutely clear. What happened today reflects a catastrophic failure of our company culture, training protocols, and verification procedures. This was not an isolated incident by a rogue employee. It was the result of structural problems that allowed discrimination to go unchecked and unchallenged. Effective immediately, we are implementing the following changes. What followed was a comprehensive list of reforms that went far beyond typical corporate damage control. The Reynolds Protocol would fundamentally restructure how passenger verification and conflict resolution were handled throughout the airline. Every step that had failed during the incident would be reinforced with new safeguards specifically designed to prevent bias from influencing decisions. The video concluded with Dominic turning to Aria. I'd like to give my wife the opportunity to speak directly to this situation. Aria's portion of the address was brief but powerful. What happened to me today happens to countless passengers who don't have cameras recording or powerful connections. The only reason my story is being heard is because of who I'm married to. Remember that the next time you witness discrimination and think it's not your problem. Today it was me, tomorrow it could be you, your mother, your child. Her words emphasizing that the issue was larger than her individual experience transformed the narrative from a single incident to a call for collective responsibility. As night fell on the East Coast, the consequences continued to materialize. SkyPoint announced the creation of a passenger advocacy office that would report directly to the board of directors rather than through operational channels. The office would be headed by a respected civil rights attorney and staffed by independent investigators with the authority to review any complaint without management interference. The airline also took the unprecedented step of releasing comprehensive statistics on previous discrimination complaints, data that had previously been closely guarded. The numbers revealed a troubling pattern. Passengers of color were significantly more likely to be subject to additional verification, security checks, and removal requests than white passengers in similar situations. By acknowledging these patterns openly, rather than denying or minimizing them, SkyPoint established a new standard for corporate transparency in addressing discrimination. The controlled chaos of the immediate aftermath unfolded across multiple locations simultaneously. At Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport, federal investigators continued gathering statements from Flight 631 passengers. At SkyPoint's corporate headquarters in Dallas, emergency teams worked to implement the comprehensive response plan, and across social media, the incident continued to reverberate as millions shared, commented on, and debated what had transpired. By 6:00 p.m. Eastern Time, just hours after landing, the consequences were already materializing with remarkable speed. Victoria Prescott's formal arrest was captured by airport security cameras. The footage showing the former flight attendant being escorted in handcuffs through employee areas leaked almost immediately to news outlets. Her expression, a mixture of shock and indignation, became an instantly recognizable image across the internet. Captain Richard Garcia, though not arrested, was placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. His captain's credentials were temporarily suspended by the FAA, a rare and serious action that effectively grounded him regardless of SkyPoint's internal decisions. In the private airport lounge where Aria and Dominic Reynolds had established a temporary command center, Thomas Willis provided continuous updates on the unfolding situation. Ms. Prescott has been formally charged with assault and battery under federal jurisdiction. Bail hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. He paused before continuing. And there's more. 3 passengers have come forward with previous complaints against her, all involving similar treatment of minority passengers. Those cases were apparently settled quietly. Dominic's expression hardened. Find every complaint ever filed against her, even if it was dismissed or settled. I want to know if this was a pattern that we failed to address. Aria, who had been focused on keeping Layla comfortable amid the commotion, looked up. It's almost certainly a pattern. People don't suddenly develop these behaviors in isolated incidents. In a quiet moment alone together with Layla finally napping in a portable crib, Aria finally let her guard down completely. Her hands trembled as she accepted the cup of tea Dominic offered. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I were just another passenger, she said softly. If I didn't have you, if there weren't cameras, if I couldn't prove who I was, I would have been dragged off that plane in handcuffs, Dom, with our baby. Dominic sat beside her, taking her hands in his. But you weren't. You held your ground. You forced them to expose themselves. That doesn't make it hurt any less, she replied, a tear finally escaping. Being slapped, being humiliated in front of all those people, hearing their laughter when she made that baby daddy comment? Her voice broke. I had to sit there and take it, knowing that showing any emotion would just reinforce their narrative. He pulled her close, his anger at what she'd endured palpable. You shouldn't have had to be so strong. That's the part that kills me. After allowing herself this brief moment of vulnerability, Aria straightened her shoulders. We have work to do, she said, wiping her eyes. This can't just be about Victoria Prescott or Richard Garcia. Victoria Prescott's conviction became a permanent cautionary tale in aviation training worldwide. Her 15 months in federal prison, followed by permanent industry blacklisting, served as a stark reminder that discrimination carried real career-ending consequences. Captain Garcia never flew commercially again. His former authority, a distant memory, as he took a warehouse position in rural Tennessee, his fall from command complete and irreversible. The Reynolds Protocol expanded beyond aviation to transform customer service standards across hospitality, retail, and transportation industries. What began as one airline's crisis response evolved into a fundamental rethinking of how verification, documentation, and accountability could create equitable treatment regardless of appearance or background. The Passenger Equity Foundation, established by Aria and Dominic, provided support for thousands who experienced discrimination without cameras or connections, ensuring the legacy of Flight 631 extended far beyond one family's experience. 2 years later, Layla Reynolds celebrated her second birthday on a SkyPoint flight to visit her grandparents. The flight attendant who brought her a special cupcake had no idea of the toddler's historic significance. She simply saw a happy child traveling with loving parents exactly as it should be. Though Layla would never remember the incident that changed commercial aviation, she would grow up in a world marginally more fair, more accountable, and more determined to ensure that dignity wasn't reserved only for those with power, but extended to every passenger regardless of who might be watching. If you found this story powerful, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Share this video with someone who needs to understand how discrimination can be exposed and changed through documentation and accountability. Your comments matter too. Tell us about similar experiences you've witnessed or experienced. Together we can create a world where everyone is treated with dignity regardless of who they are or who might be watching. Remember, change happens when we refuse to stay silent in the face of injustice.